Hamad Hifai, the Kota Kita Foundation from Indonesia, Ming Zhuang from the Social Equity Participation Center in China. The idea is we have some questions for this about the perspective of the right to the city in Asia region. And yeah, I know, I think we can start. I know there is one video from Mr. Ambassador from the city of Guangzhou. Maybe you can start with this video for start the session.
My name is Yoon-Ye Chul, and I'm the new ambassador for international relations at the metropolitan city of Gwangju. I'm very much honored and pleased to be part of this important town hall meeting. I'm in my 36th year of service as Korean diplomat, and most recently, I was the Korean ambassador to Egypt. Previously, I also had the privilege of working at the United Nations Secretariat with Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the 8th Secretary General, and met distinguished leaders like Madam Bachelet, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who at that time was the first executive director of UN Women. I was a university student in the early 1980s, a turbulent period in the Korean history when it seemed like the battles between students and riot police would go on forever. With their demonstrations, those students asked for justice, democracy, and human rights. But those words sounded subversive to the military dictatorship in Korea back then and were thus taboos. In this context, the May 18th democracy movement of 1980 that courageous Gwangju citizens heroically staged was a turning point for Korea on its way toward a full-fledged democracy. I personally came to a true appreciation of the importance of human rights when I joined the United Nations, where human rights was among the top 3 pillars for the organization, along with peace and development. Now, I was pleasantly surprised to witness the role of Gwangju, or local government, actively promoting the rights of citizens for the last 10 years through this World Human Rights Cities Forum at the global level. So we here have the case of local perspective. In addition to this forum, the city of Gwangju is promoting itself as a human rights city in many ways. I wish to present to you some aspects of our efforts to promote collaboration with the civil society in the areas of social inclusion, participatory democracy, cultural diversity, and inclusive economy, among others. Most of all, the city government requires all city hall officials to take courses in human rights. This requirement applies to all social service providers in the organizations supported by the City Hall. The training process exposes all local government employees to the issues of human rights. An interesting outcome is most people in Gwangju feel comfortable to the issue of human rights, which some time ago was a remote, unfamiliar concept. In addition, most of the lecturers of the human rights classes are from civil society. The classes contribute greatly to developing a mutually beneficial rapport to facilitate dialogues between civil society activists and the government people on diverse issues of rights to the city. I'm afraid I do not have enough time to talk about all the details of the measures Gwangju is employing, so I will simply enumerate some of the important features that promote the collaboration between the City Hall and civil society. First, we have the Human Rights Impact Assessment System. This means that all ordinances proposed either by the City Hall or the City Council are to undergo a screening process by civil society activists and researchers. We have also introduced human rights indicators in our evaluation of the city's achievement in this area, with around 70 elements in 5 categories, with members of the civil society participating in this process. There are numerous committees which are mostly composed of members of civil society or presided by respected activists. Particularly, the Human Rights Improvement Citizen Committee is co-chaired by the city mayor and a prominent member of the civil society. The committee was prescribed in the Human Rights Ordinance in 2009 and has been in operation ever since. We also have the Human Rights Policy Joint Meeting, which is a forum run in cooperation with human rights activists. Gwangju has been carrying out the Human Rights Neighborhood Project to promote human rights awareness and enhance problem-solving capacity among citizens within their neighborhood with the support of the City Hall. The project is aimed at creating a human rights culture and improving the human rights environment at the neighborhood level. Of course, our World Human Rights Cities Forum is the most important vehicle for promoting collaboration between the City Hall and civil society. Most of the organizing committee members are from 20 civil society organizations and schools. The forum also helps both city government employees and civil society activists to be exposed to the international issues such as rights to the city, SDG, and new urban agenda. The city of Gwangju also created devices to help underprivileged people in the COVID-19 crisis in collaboration more with the national government than with the local civil society. We also find that there are some limitations in our effort for the promotion for the right to the city. We realized that the issues of refugees, housing, and climate change are not easy to handle at the local level. You can get more information, including ordinances and other devices of human rights protection from the Gwangju City report to the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights last year. I hope I was not too long. I really appreciate this opportunity to share the progress we have made here. And I sincerely hope that this could be a good example for our friends in other cities and that you will also provide valuable advice for us at the same time. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the town hall meeting. Thank you very much.
So, thank you now for the participation of Mr. Ambassador from the Gwangju City by this video, make this introduction about how special in Gwangju City are working the perspective, the human rights and the right to the city. Now we go to start, this dialogue. The idea, for the methodology for this session is we have some questions, for the participants here from the local authorities, civil society, and then each one can have 3 minutes, 5 minutes to raise your answer, your opinion about these questions. The first question for this dialogue is if the participants if you have some, do you have some vision, concepts about human rights or human rights city or right to the city in special to be adopted for development of the cities in Asia region or in general? I would like to start with this topic with Mr. Ramon Asper from the housing community. Thank you for enjoying.
I'm sorry, Nelson. Mr. Ramon seems to be having some problems with his internet. He was here a few minutes ago, but he isn't anymore. So I think we can go through
Yes,
other
perfect.
participants.
Okay, thank you, Enrique. So we can go for the colleagues from civil society. First of all is Maria Fides Bagassal from Haru Commission, Philippines. Thank you for joining this session.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this town hall session to the Gwangju Human Rights City Forum. I am from a local NGO in Philippines called Community Organizers Multiversity, and we're also members of the Global Coalition Supporting Grassroots Women, the Huayro Commission, and also the Platform to the Right to the City. Regarding our vision or plans, I would like to share or highlight just a few of our main advocacies for our how women's rights can be fulfilled in the city. The first would be really about items on regulation on urban planning and economic. And then the second one would be on participation, you know, in how to develop the city, and very basic things such as adequate housing for them, the tenure and freedom, women freedom from violence. Well, also recognition for their care as women in their homes, and also participation in the planning of public services and disease. So I think these are some of our main advocacies for how we would like to be promoted in the cities for our you know, for our town officials and other authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Fides. Now, Siri Sojan from Haru Commission, also what your perspective, you know, about the to adopt, you know, the right to the city, human rights for the building cities, develop cities. In your perspective, or the Haru Commission are working?
Thank you, Nelson. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you. So I want to compliment what my colleague Fides is saying. As she mentioned, we are from Huayro Commission. So Huayro Commission is actually a woman-led social movement of over 100 grassroots organizations from at least 45 countries. And the grassroots organization are those that are located in poor, urban, rural, and indigenous communities. We work collectively for transformative change that improves the life condition, status, and quality of life of women, their families, and also the municipalities. We work to secure public recognition for the leadership of organized groups of grassroots women and around the world, and to position local women-led organization as driving forces in public agenda setting and political accountability. Now, Fides mentioned some of those points for advocacy. Actually, Huayro Commission is also an active member or co-chairing the Right to Cities Women Working Group. And we have together collectively come up with the Women Manifesto to the Right to Cities. We have 10 points, and those 10 points include combating all forms of discrimination. And this is very much related to also the Global Human Rights for Women, the CEDAW, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination for Women. The second point is about political participation, women's right to political participation, at all levels, free from violence. Fides mentioned that. Access to adequate and affordable housing, recognize values and redistribution of work that involve the care of dependent. This is very important because in cities, women have to struggle both economically for the family, to bring and accommodate and supplement, the income of the family, but at the same time, they also have to care, the care work in the family. So we must recognize the value and the need to redistribute that. So cities that believe in, the rights, human rights, will also recognize this. The sixth point is equitable and affordable access to goods, public services, and opportunities. The seventh point is economic autonomy of women and guaranteeing equality in employment, dignity, and equal remuneration. Basically, as much as possible, it's best to give equal or same salary for the same kind of work for both men and women. Point number 8, women has voices and roles in planning, designing, production, and use of urban spaces. Fides mentioned that point as well in terms of point for our advocacy. Number 9, guaranteeing communal identities, respect, and allow diversity of culture and social custom. And the last one, to eliminate social, economic, and gender inequalities between the rural and urban areas. So this is very important because when we talk about cities, we have to recognize the dependency between the rural and urban areas. Yeah, I just want to also mention that if I can also share something on the screen, if the host will allow me to do that. We, Huairou Commission, has also been asked by the United Cities and Local Government, UCLG, to actually produce the policy paper on women's empowerment and gender equality. Let me see if I can actually share screen. I'll just share this. So this document was presented in the town hall during the UCLG Congress last year in November in Durban, and it has been also adopted at that Congress. I think Nelson, you will remember that also Global Platform for the Right to Cities also produced one paper. So we are, together in this, yeah, because the points and all that are very much supporting and complementing, and nothing is contradicting. We are all together in this journey. Just to highlight that, for cities, they have to remember, city leaders have to remember, and I really think like the introduction by Mr. Ambassador, giving a good practice of how Gwangju actually, have training, human rights training for all public servants, and also have that activity with at the neighborhood level with, indicators for assessment and all that. Those are good practices, and I think those need to be also reported, yeah, in the SDGs reporting for the country, or at the voluntary local reporting from the city. Just to emphasize that the human rights and rights of women, so when we say rights of women, we want gender equality and empowerment of women, and that is actually shouldn't be seen as an additional burden for city government. It should be parcel part of, you know, development process, and that that they have to realize that gender equality and women's empowerment are enablers of efficient and accountable local government. It is not an addition or burden, and cities can adopt principles and strategies to accelerate social, political, economic participation and inclusive decision making and equitable development. I don't know, Nelson, whether I still have time, because I could give 4 points or I could come back. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll leave it to
Thank
you.
you. Thank you very much, Siri. Very important. No, your introduction for this dialogue is special. Bring the perspective, the right to the city, and gender equality. It's for us the global platform, the right to the city, is one component of our vision, the right to the city. And this working group, the gender in the global platform right to the city, are doing a fantastic work, in special with this, bringing, you know, in this manifesto about the right to the city and gender, many perspective, the actions also, no, is necessary to take in your cities for this implementation of the right to the city, in special with gender equality. Now I go to give the open for the colleague Alan Brown. He is enjoying, you know, this session for the International Center of Guangzhou City. It can bring also the perspective, you know, in Guangzhou, you know, about the right to the city, human rights, or also in the general perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name's Alan Brown, and at the moment I'm working with the Guangzhou International Center and doing research with the support of Nelson regarding right to the city. And I'm actually representing my colleague, Dr. Shin Kyung-gyu, who's always been deeply involved in this field. And I would like to just make a few comments on what I feel are Guangzhou's strengths with regard to right to the city, with regard to human rights city, and how these can impact other cities in Asia and in countries outside Asia. So the first point is, one of the major achievements of Guangzhou trying to develop itself as a human rights city, this has been the mainstreaming of human rights discourse into the national discourse of politics. Now, as you may know, Korea has quite a short history of democracy, and in the early stages, the fight for human rights was overshadowed by the fight for democracy. So human rights was seen through a narrow lens, and that was basically the protection from state violence by human rights activists or democracy activists. However, Guangzhou's used its unique human rights history and history of fighting for democracy to build this vision of a human rights city. And through this, it's acted as a driving force or a catalyst for other cities in Korea to also adopt human rights ordinances. And there are currently, I think, 17 other local governments, provincial governments and city governments that have adopted human rights ordinances. And so Guangzhou has a role as like I said, just a force that propels the idea of human rights. Then secondly, there's the issue of a human rights city versus right to the city. And I think there needs to be more of a discourse as to how these two concepts overlap and how these two concepts can be either, they're not separate concepts, they have the overlaps, but also just to clarify the concept of right to the city and human rights city, and perhaps come up with a more holistic concept. And thirdly, just one of the reported weak points of Gwangju city, which shows in terms of government, there's still a lot of progress to be made. And this is that in Gwangju, although in almost you could say in the DNA of Gwangju, there's this idea of human rights and being a human rights city. And as Mr. Ambassador mentioned, local government officials all receive human rights training, and the human rights indicators and ordinances are assessed for their human rights value and how they affect human rights. However, between departments in the city, there is very little collaboration with regard to this. So once again, this is done department by department. So there also needs to be more of a holistic approach to bringing this into local government and allowing the different departments to communicate with each other for this. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
I agree with you. No, it's very important we go more deep, no, regarding the vision, the human rights of the city. I know is in the perspective, you know, the local authorities, especially in Gwangju City, you know, are working with the vision, the human rights city. The forum is exactly human rights city, you know. And the connection or if the similarities is for me very important regarding the vision, the right to the city. You know, we are working a long time, you know, from the different organizations networking now in the last 5 years, especially in the global platform, the right to the city. We bring are building one vision for to have the perspective, the right to the city in the Habitat 3 conference, especially in the new urban agenda, is already on the vision about the right to the city, taking account the vision we're building from the global platform, the right to the city. I think the research, you mentioned, you are done together with the other organizations here about the perspective right to the city in Asia region. I think you'll be fantastic apport for the discussion to this dialogue, for we have one perspective together, the vision of the human rights in the city. I think the main difference in this, for me or for our colleagues, the human rights in the city bring more the traditional vision of the human rights, the individual human rights, the inhabitants in the city. The right to the city bring more the perspective of the collective rights, like environmental rights, for example, the cultural rights, more collective perspective of the inhabitants. But I think I agree with you. This one key point for us in this dialogue together, not only in the Asia region, but with the local. a more general spotlight, from Kotakita Foundation, also for this Asia or in general perspective also.
Hi, Nelson.
Good morning.
So this is no Martin. I couldn't hear you for a couple minutes.
Maybe we have some problem with Nelson connection, but
No,
Ahmad,
he
was calling you, Ahmad. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So in responding to the question that Nelson raised, so I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Samat Rifai from Kotakita Foundation. So our foundation basically working on pushing an agenda of democratic city in Indonesia. So if we share about the vision for many years in Indonesian cities, for example, we are in the situation where a state and the control of the state is too dominant, and where in the context of urban development space and discussion about policy in the city has been occupied by dominant roles of the state control. So this is the situation where we feel that the decision about using space in the city are pretty much like, decided by, the dominance kind of controls of the agenda by state, but there is no space for people to criticize and involve in the decision making of the urban development. So this is how, when we think, this is why Kotakita think that it's a very urgent to kind of push the democratic process in the urban development process, especially in the development planning of the city, and also how space are utilized for the purpose of the general public of the city. So, for example, we really want to encourage that to reduce a lot of displacement by group in the city that has been, that has been affected by agenda of by development agenda in the city that created through the process that it's not participatory at all, or that it's not democratic in the process of the making. So this is what we are trying to kind of as a vision, we want to make it the city to be more participatory. At the same time, also how best facilitate the process of engagement by public, especially people in the city. So this is what we call as a vision for human right in the city and right to the city in Indonesia. Thank you, Nelson.
Nelson, can you hear us? I think he's having a problem. So I would like to call Ming Zhuang from China.
Thank you, Hamad. And now
Ming, please.
Hello, shall I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Yes, thanks, Henry. And good morning and good evening, everyone. This is Min. I'm from China. Our organization is called Social Equity and Participation Center. So we work mainly on citizen engagement and transparency. So I think the biggest challenge now we have in our perspective in China, I think, is rapid urbanization and the lack of public resources in development areas, especially in the cities, booming cities with a very high speed of urbanization in recent years. The situation, the conflicts or the challenges has been lasted for many years. And you know, as Chinese government has done a lot, moving people out of poverty from rural and remote rural regions. But I think in the future, the conflicts of the inequality and the right to the city, lack of decent public resources for public services, equal and universal public services for everyone living in the city will be a huge challenge. So I think this is one of the biggest rationale we have to think about and follow in China. So how do we engage? We work mainly on the transparency about the service delivery, about the public budget for public services. So we work very specifically on education, right to education for rural migrant children, their equal right to education services in urban cities. And we also work on participatory budgeting, on public budgets for local public services. We also do some policy and budget research, budget performance research in close collaboration with local governments. So to mention about the challenges, I think one of the challenges, what I just talked about, the rapid urbanization and lack of public service resources budgets. And another one, I think, when we talk about China, I think when we talk about China and the world, I think we need to talk about a bridge that could connect Chinese cities and their counterparts worldwide. Because in too many times when we talk about human rights, in many occasions, I think Chinese government might find it offensive because it has been, how do I say, misunderstood or manipulated as a criticize Chinese government. But as we have been working very closely with local governments and some international organizations, I believe the same definition and the same languages we should also be, how do I say, be talking about, to think, to communicate effectively and efficiently. Like what we have, the work we have done in Chengdu, maybe we do not have very the agenda like like Huairou Commission has just presented, or Kotakita has just presented. But in our own local policies, we have our policy agendas for the social benefits improvement, like the public services development, for housing, for education, for many of the public services to provide this, to deliver these services to those newly citizens who just arrived from rural areas to the urban cities. So I believe there is many of the opportunities and possible activities that we could move on to work with our international partners from other countries and build a dialogue between Chinese cities and other cities. Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Ming. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes,
can you hear me?
Fantastic. So we go for the next question for this dialogue. is exactly, you know, you mentioned now me about agenda. This is the second question, no, for we have this dialogue, you know, for your organizations, or you are now already now working in the perspective of the human rights, the right to the city. What should be, you know, the key areas for considering, you know, the reality of the Asian cities can be strategic, you know, for to build, you know, to have one right to the city agenda for the Asian cities. No, I know there's some perspective you mentioned, no, the participation, no, this, for example, but I would like to you now know. Could you give, you know, for us some ideas, perspective, no? What are the key areas, considering the reality of Asian cities, can be strategic for one right to the city agenda for the Asian cities? Bom, I start with the colleague Fides. Maria Fides, please.
Yeah, I think that's a very big question, because Asia is very diverse. But especially we're doing a research now, no, on what are our perspectives on the right to the city. So based on this initial study we're doing, like for the Philippines, we're doing 2 cities. I think the most important one, really, to be able to develop a right to the city agenda in a specific city, and maybe later with other cities, is to find out what are the strengths of the civil society and the local government, where we can be really together in their main agenda, whether it's inclusivity and regarding housing or participation, citizen participation. So those are very too important, because, you know, adequate housing or an in-city accommodation, and the participation where they can dialogue. And Asia has a lot of urban movements, and they are not violent movements. They are very organized, and they are long-term movements, and they are in dialogues with their governments and also with their national. And therefore, each of these kind of cities, I can think right now of, let's say, in South Korea, right? In South Korea, or in Jakarta, or in Manila and Quezon City. So that's 4, and maybe Bangkok and a few others. I don't know, maybe Cambodia, because there are movements here and they are in touch with their government. So I think that's the first, is to have this kind of clear relationships of movements with their local their cities, and then for these cities and urban movements to come together, like have a manifesto as well. So little by little. So for me, I don't know if it answers the question, but for me that's my perspective on developing a right to the city agenda.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philips. City, I know you are raising, you know, the gender, one from a special, no, topic component, the right to the city, to work in the Asia regions. But how you think for one more general agenda, no, the right to the cities agenda in the Asia city, you know, should be, you know, the key areas, key topics, no, for to building this agenda?
Thank you, Nelson. I think to complement what Fides and other colleagues have been saying, and also, building on that, I think this research in Asia that we are starting, it's mapping, right? We have, 5 countries with selected cities. I think that's a beginning to also the mapping, and also from the women's perspective, the Women's Working Group of Right to Cities is also still in the process of mapping as well. So through this mapping, I think we could find elements that are overlaps, that are common, and from there we could build up like an indicator kind of thing as a baseline. Because I think right now we need a baseline, right, on what are the key areas that is possible. But from my observation and working with different groups, not only through the Right of Cities, the Right to Cities platform, but also engaging with other civil society as well as also local government. Think we could also one of the strategic area is maybe through budget, the right to budget, the right to be participating and having a voice in budgeting. I think in Indonesia, I think maybe Ahmad, I don't know how you could see, like for example, the gender responsive participatory budgeting have the lens and the element of right to cities. Thank you. I think that's my comment or input right now.
Thank you, Siri. I invite Alan Brown. Special. You have this initiative, this experience in Guangzhou City. Maybe you can explore more. How is the human rights city agenda in Guangzhou? It could be also the perspective, the right to the city, one agenda, the human rights for the Asian cities, the key areas.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. So, firstly, I really agree with the speaker Fides that the right to the city, people who are promoting the right to the city and who believe in the right to the city, there needs to be some kind of language with which to communicate with government, with local government. At the moment, I think often it is seen that there are two kind of opposing viewpoints, but I think an important thing is to find these areas of commonality and a way to approach for proponents of right to the city to approach local government, and also for local government to be able to understand that the issues raised by the right to the city are also their own issues. And this would allow them to be more responsive to the citizens, and it also would allow them to consider how to engage the citizens and give the citizens a voice in policy making and governance. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Hamad, with the work we are doing in the Kota Kita, especially in the Indonesia cities, for you work you are done, how for the Kota Kita should be the key areas, topics to build one agenda, the right to the city in the Asian cities.
Thank you, Nelson. I think if we talk about the key area, I would like to underline first the importance of the inclusive participations in the overall urban development processes. So this is one that we have to push. I think something can be like follow this kind of principle in the end, because so for example, in Indonesian city, Kota Kita try to push a lot how the government can understand that the participation is important in the process of the urban development. So why we impose like participatory budgeting, why we impose participatory planning, why we impose any process of participation during the policy making. So for example, in deciding local law or local kind of regulation, for example, like that. Even our kind of city has to consult with the people in regard to deciding the midterm planning by the city, say, for example. I think another key area that is really important, and it's our concern a lot, is about the space and spatial kind of justice, especially in regard to dignified housing. It's really important. Now we have to push that forward. And then the other one is how to also further campaign around accessible, inclusive public space in the city, where now the pressing urban development has, like reduced a lot the space for kind of inclusive public space in many Asian cities. That's my perspective, the key area that we have to push forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamad. I invite Mingi also about this question.
Nielsen, yeah, thanks. I think when we talk about the definition of human rights, we must consider about the various definitions based on the different contexts, social and political contexts in different countries. So whether this human rights definition is based on the legitimacy of the political party, or based on the performance and achievements of the local and national governments. And I think it's very important to articulate and identify some of the common topics we've been discussing about the human rights. But there is something very common, I think, the engagement, the direct participation and the voices from citizens, and the collaboration or cooperatives between the citizens and the government, and between and among the different cities and countries. I think that would be extremely important to discuss about based on very verified backgrounds. Thanks.
Thank you, Mingi. So, continuing with this topic, the agenda, the right to the city, for the perspective you are working on in your countries, in your cities. You can share some initiatives are already done for your organizations or in your cities. You are now working with this research, the perspective, the right to the city in the region, like City mentioned, you make mapping, the initiative experience, you are analyzing some cities in your countries also. Could you share or about the initiatives? No, you in your work, you build some. I know you build some agendas for the citizens, for habitants, together with other organizations. No specific should be the right to the city agenda, but like a housing agenda or about public space. Can you share some initiative experiences already done? Maybe also with some results, impacts in your experience, in your work, inside your organizations. Start again with the colleague Fides.
Thank you, Nelson. I think that's a very good question. It's very practical, at the same time strategic. I can give an updated initiative of the Philippine civil society. Of course, they are composed of especially urban poor groups and NGOs, but they're mainly for the last few years, and it succeeded recently in 2015. So it's already 2020. So these are long-term advocacies. They had summit and lobbying in the Congress. At the same time, they had their own education in the community to understand the issue. We have an Urban Development and Housing Act, which was passed in 1992, but because it's not working too much, so people challenge. I think that's the main point, is they challenge. If a law is not working, people have to challenge, citizens have to challenge. Therefore, because it's not a good law, right? So citizens have to challenge and improve or reform or abolish. So what they won recently is to have a more, coherent, integrated human settlement. So they are able to secure a Congress law in 2015, and they have been able to have establishment of a Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. It will incorporate the finance, the policy, the housing, the regulatory. But the main thing that we are all demanding is a provision in this law, in this amendment, that social policy must be based on a multi-stakeholder, not just consultation, but really a consensus among multi-stakeholder for a social policy about urban development. So this is a very recent initiative. And then also we had an executive order in the previous government that we're able to follow up, that a 50 billion in city resettlement that allowed organized groups to establish their own process of planning their settlement, small low-cost housing for 300 families to 1,000. So, but the question is, the current government provide this and others? So this is our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Fides. Siri?
I don't have any addition right now, Nelson. I think I'll pass.
Okay, thank you, Siri. So I pass and I invite Alan Brown. I think Guangzhou City is special for to share the agendas. The local governments are doing about the human rights cities.
Okay, yeah. Well, what I'm going to do is just share some details of one of their specific agendas, which was the establishment of human rights indicators. And now, this is human rights indicators, but this idea could be expanded to right to the city indicators. And this started in 2012, and these were developed to objectively assess the human rights situation in Gwangju. And among these agendas, these indicators, they take into account the local characteristics of Gwangju, as well as universal human rights issues. And the purpose of these indicators is not only to know the current situation and whether it's improving, but it's also to use the data gathered to consider and to implement further initiatives. And since this started, generally, I'll just give you an example of some of the human rights indicators. For example, participation and communication, guaranteeing a happy life, inclusive city, comfort and safety, culture and creativity. And since this was first established, 75% of these indicators have shown an increasing trend. There were some that haven't, and what this has done is it's allowed Gwangju to really understand the human rights situation in Gwangju more deeply, and also it uses quite a broad aspect of broad kind of definition of what human rights is. And even though this is not fully understood by the citizens, for example, there's some things, the issue of access to housing in Korea is generally not considered a human rights issue by the citizens. However, this is also included in the indicators. And yeah, I'll just quickly take a look at some of the indicators and the results. And for example, so there are a total of 27 measures just that I have listed in front of me. And most of these things, like citizen human rights education, high school human rights education, these have all increased quite dramatically because the local government, as part of its human rights effort, has pushed for this. However, there are others that are stubborn human rights issues that are very difficult to change. So in terms of safety, for example, the Gwangju still lags behind other cities. However, these indicators have allowed Gwangju to really focus on these issues and to try and improve them. Okay, anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. How much? I know the Kota Kita working. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Please?
yes. Okay, so basically I would like to focus and sharing some of the initiative that Kota Kita work with the government, so it's more clear, because I don't want to share also some of the broad kind of initiative that may be in different cities in Indonesia. So basically, so for example, the initiative that Kota Kita really want to push forward in Indonesian cities is one of the aspects that Kota Kita now working in is pushing the democratic urban governance in many cities in Indonesia. So we are focusing, last year we are doing a review to participatory budgeting effort in Indonesia by making some kind of summary of the progress of 10 years participatory budgeting in Indonesia, and we critique government and we give an input around how this space has been utilized, or how this space has been useful for making democratic urban development. In many cities in Indonesia, so for example, the government seems to be more technocratic rather than making this space to be more substantive. So technocratic means that the space of participatory budgeting in Indonesia has been occupied by very technocratic process and made many people feel bored and the participation then meaningless. So this has been our view to the current progress of urban participatory urban development in Indonesian cities. So for example, we contribute to the process and critique and give some input to the government and how to better reform this. At the ground, at a very grounded level, Kota Kita contribute to some piloting how to show community action plan can be useful if the government want to integrate their plan with the community agenda. So for example, in Banjarmasin, we propose and we make a pilot together with the community in Sungai Chinga to build participatory process of designing public space in the riverbank area around Sungai Chinga. So this is a good example how the government can push further how, say for example, if they want to plan public space, they can work with the community and make it more accessible and democratic as well. It's very useful because people really like the space that they create and they own. So that's the very example of what we are working on democratic urban governance in Indonesia. We are also moving forward with our second agenda, we call it as inclusive urban development, where we're focusing on how marginalized and then people who are left behind by urban development being represented in the urban development context. So for example, many projects or many intervention of public services for people with disability are often problematic in Indonesian city. So this merely because they lack of data about disability. So the process of collecting data of people with disability often very unparticipatory. So they just pick up the data from data of poverty data, but do not check directly what type of disability and stuff. So Kota Kita has been working in this work quite a lot this years. And the last one, the initiative that Kota Kita really support is sustainable resilient city. So we are making a lot of kind of project on giving some kind of pathway or kind of guidance for making like, we call it resilience kampung, where community actually have a lot of resource and power to actually push the government to also support the initiative in the local or the kampung in Indonesia. Many community in Indonesia have a very good project on mitigating or adaptation to the climate change, for example. So the government have to be aware about involving local community to better support the sustainability and resilience of the Indonesian urban context. So that's what I can share with you. So, but if you want to visit some of the real tangible concept that we have, you can visit our website on the kotakita.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamad. Now we have also the colleague Su Yung Hu. No, she also are working with the Ming in this research about the perspective, the right to the city in China, and I invite her for sharing, the initiatives, the experience you are having in our organization in China.
Thank you very much, Nelson, and hi everyone. So I think it's quite important to note that, and also following up from what Ming has mentioned before about the different definition of human rights in the context of a particular political and social system. So I think China at the central level has actually recognized the problems of, the twin forces of rapid urbanization as well as globalization. In fact, I think it has identified the challenges of uneven development that it has gone through over the past few decades, as well as the need and the importance of adopting a people-centric approach when it comes to sort of urban governance. So I think in this regard, what we can see at the local level and directly related to what we at Social Equity and Participation Center are doing is the inequality that is explicit in the recognition that there has been uneven development actually has led central government to implement some changes with regards to the migrant workers' children education. Something is a topic that we're working on for the research project. And I think in terms of relaxing some of the requirements for the registration of school, central government has tried to do that, and local governments to a certain extent have also tried to enforce it, not without challenges, of course. And for participation of Social Equity and Participation Center, what we are also trying to do is to come in to fill up the gap. So we are providing training to improve the quality of the teachers at a lot of these private schools, which are providing education for the migrant workers' children because they're not able to get into the public schools, which are more well-funded. So I think this is one area that our organization is trying to sort of look at. And one very interesting development that I'd like to share that really highlights sort of the Chinese government's effort to try and promote and bring about a more people-centric kind of self-governance is through participatory budgeting. And I think interestingly enough, our colleagues from Malaysia Street has highlighted the importance of sort of having people participate directly in budgetary decisions and policy making. I think Ahmad has also nicely shared an example of Indonesia as well. So I think in China, especially in Chengdu, what Participation Center has been engaged with is participatory budgeting for the past 10 years. And this has seen some rather promising results with people really being more on board and starting to recognize the importance of having a say in how they want, you know, the money to be used in what kind of projects. And a more exciting development, I think, is how our organization is also trying to innovate to sort of keep up with the times where technology and social media is such an important component of our lives. And I think Ming is actually working very hard on the ground to get local governments cooperation. And I think he has succeeded to actually secure access to quite a few test sites to test out bringing participatory budgeting onto social media, which is to use WeChat, a very popular social media platform, and to try and look at using WeChat to sort of increase the reach of participatory budgeting to enable a lot more people to have a more inclusive approach to sort of having a say in in budgetary matters. Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. So now we go for we have a few minutes now to close this whole session. Yeah, I think it's important now because in each session on this forum, because we are inside the Human Rights Cities Forum in Guangzhou, it's very important we give for the closed session, the closed plenary session of the forum, some raising on some topics was very important from each session, or some recommendations. Yeah, I think it's very important for this town hall session. Also, we provide some recommendations for the closed plenary session from the forum. So I think it's very important, if each one could give some proposal, what do you think should be the key messages we can bring for the closed sessions about this dialogue we are having here, the perspective of the human rights and right to the cities in Asia region. I start again with the colleague Fides. What do you think should be the main recommendation or key message for this plenary closed session of the forum regarding the discussion we are having here in the town hall?
Thank you, Nelson. What would be the main message? I think that for us who are advocates for women empowerment and gender equality, the message for our to this forum is essentially the inclusivity in participation in how cities can be really developed. Because when we say inclusivity, then it means also the women, but more on what methodology do we use in getting citizens to participate. So I think this would be the message, is that we have to still promote inclusivity in participation, and the method that's being used to really bring in the messages of the different kinds of sense, because you know, women will have different priorities and other sectors will have other priorities. But how will you get that inclusivity if you are not going to have a very clear instrument in, you know, communicating with your citizens? Thank you.
Thank you, Fidis. I invite Siri also for what do you think, you know, should be, you know, the key messages or recommendation for this for the forum, you know, for the plenary closed session, to include, you know, in the recommendations they go to discuss, include, you know, with in the results of this forum.
Thank you. I think from the discussion and from the inputs of all other panelists, I think participation is key, and I think participation is the basic entry point for our right to cities advocacy, and I would like to also look at, you know, what Ellen was mentioning about the indicators, and use that point about there is also an indicators to in reporting SDG about participation of, you know, the citizen participation. Now we must also make the message that participation is just not ticking the point, but real participation of the citizen. And, you know, real participation means real participation means admitting or acknowledging and recognizing citizens as equal partners in development, in making a decision. I think that point about, if we talk about participation, and that is a basic entry for right to cities, or one of the key point for right to cities, then, you know, recognition and acknowledgement that citizen is equal, is partner for development, and therefore their voice must be heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siri. I agree totally with you. You know, it should be this, the participation is a key message we need to bring for the forum in the closed session.
Yeah, inclusive participation. That's a word that all of our colleague panelists mentioned.
Yes, thank you very much. Now I invite Alan, please.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree with the previous speakers. And I also want to just add something, is how to create a space for the inclusive participation. So, and one thing I thought of is the idea of what I mentioned before, a language for communication with local governments. So the idea of either conflict or cooperation or collaboration relationship with local government. And that can be a choice on both sides. So on the one side, often it's conflictual, but that can move toward cooperation and collaboration, and that can create a space for the inclusivity and participation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Hamad?
Yeah, thank you, Nelson. So I think as a closing statement, I think I would like to say this is important in terms of how we bring and put forward the agenda of Right to the City. Is we have to consider moving forward with two approaches. The first is vertical mobilization, and the second is horizontal mobilization. What I mean vertical mobilization, I think we need to kind of push a lot the governments and then the policymaker to understand the importance of a democratic, inclusive, fair, sustainable, resilient cities for now. With the limited resources because of the pressing urban development, I think the government should really aware about the potential of the conflict. So managing democratic urban governance is really important for the future. And the second, I think horizontal mobilization is about how to further develop and making sure and promote citizen engagement, citizen activisms, and demanding for change and collective kind of movement, collaboration, stuff like that in the ground. So it's kind of ways of how we can implement Right to the City better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamad. I invite also Sue and Ming, for what do you think should be, the key messages, recommendations for the closed session, the forum.
Thank you, Nelson. I think a lot of my colleagues have already reiterated the importance of inclusive participation and also offered how in terms of creating spaces. I think maybe following up on what Ahmad has mentioned about the vertical and horizontal mobilization, I think I would like to offer an approach of a network where you can start to bring everybody together, regardless of whether is it horizontal or vertical. Because I mean, that is definitely a valid approach as well, but I'm just thinking in terms of bringing all the different stakeholders together by exploring what are different ways they can come together for partnership and sort of collaboration. I think at least academically there has been a bit of research with also empirical studies. And speaking of empirical studies, I think that from sort of our 4 different countries research project, what will be very exciting is to be able to then start to see how all these relationships between the local governments and civil society has developed to try and overcome some of the obstacles that civil society faces. And then to be able to pull out some of the commonalities that despite being quite diverse sort of countries in our own right, that I'm very sure amongst and between all the experiences, we should be able to pull out some common experiences and also learning points for Asia and beyond.
And Nielsen, and my last words as a recommendation for the Human Rights Cities Forum is that besides this forum, to achieve a common language that many cities from many different countries could communicate, I think besides the forum, there are some other activities like the indicators development, like the comparative study or learning exchanges, I think also helpful for us to communicate and understand each other and to achieve the same goal. Thanks.
Thank you, Ming. Now, before we close this session, I want to invite the colleague Jem from the UCLG, especially the Commission of Human Rights from UCLG, because this town hall session is one inspiration from exactly, like Siri mentioned in the beginning. We have this experience in the last Congress from UCLG last year in Durban, and then we organized one town hall about the right to the city. It was a fantastic experience in that moment with dialogue between local authorities and civil society. And this inspiration bring a possibility for us to have this town hall session also here in this forum about human rights cities organized from the Guangzhou city. Yeah, it's very important to have also the participation from the colleagues from especially the Human Rights Commission from UCLG. And I invite you, Jeremy, also for making your contribution for this session. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, it was great to hear all of you. I am joining at the end to say this maybe final words on behalf of our committee. Yes, indeed, it was a great occasion, the town hall session that we had in Durban last year, and many things changed. But keeping in mind a little bit that the main focus of this session was to explore how cooperation between local governments and civil society in favor of advancing human rights and the right to the city through policies and community-led action. If that was the focus in general in Durban just less than a year ago, I see and I felt that after this World Human Rights Cities Forum 2020, hearing mayors throughout the sessions that we had, plenary session 2, plenary session 3, I think that COVID-19 and the way that local government and civil society responses have changed and evolved after COVID-19, I take two main ideas on how is this connecting with the cooperation between local governments and civil society. On one hand, I see that if the role of local governments in ensuring that no one is left behind through policies on social inclusion, access to basic services, housing, is more important than ever, this idea of public service delivery. If local governments gain some kind of public visibility and recognition for their role in managing social responses to the social crisis, the role of civil society and the importance of civil society action for local governments in itself has also improved and changed and been recognized. We see that if local government was a critical layer of government for making sure that no one was left behind in this social crisis, it has been thanks to cooperation with civil society that local governments actually managed to get this and to ensure that no one is left behind. I'm thinking of interventions that we had in this forum highlighting this idea because civil society is critical in accessing data, gaining residents' trust, disseminating information, so many different ideas that I think that it's worth continuing to explore this dual relationship. But it is not only local governments that benefited from civil society, and we must also highlight that. I think that also local governments increasingly, and thanks to approaches like the social function or the right to the city that we are commemorating this year in October, I think that local governments are also starting to see the importance of not always trying to be at the center, but also supporting and enabling the actions of communities. That we see that on areas like the protection of commons, the protection of the right to housing and community-led housing. So it is local governments that are also understanding that maybe they have to create these spaces for community self-organizing, also in areas like care, economy, for example. So these are very, very interesting topics that I take out from this World Human Rights Cities Forum and also heard throughout this town hall session. And on behalf of our committee, in the coming period, we will continue to work on the right to the city agenda, as you may be aware of, trying to expand and strengthen UCLG's agenda on the right to the city in areas like global advocacy, policy implementation, also trying to bring these emerging ideas and approaches and policies by civil society in this global environment and ecosystem that is UCLG. And specifically on behalf of our committee, we will be trying to focus on more specific issues that we see as the implementation of the right to the cities in areas like women's rights, for example, in areas like socio-spatial justice and territorial justice, that we will be connecting a lot with inequalities this 2020, or migration. So that's all. It was a pleasure again to hear all of you. and to be here at this town hall process that we really hope that it keeps going on in coming years. So thanks so much, Nelson and Enrique and Sofia, for this fantastic organization.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, for your contribution in this town hall session. So we need to close the session. Now the time for the session is until 1 hour and a half time. And I thank you very much. I also thank you for Enrique and Sofia from the members, our team, the Global Platform Directors to the City, support this session, and also the session we have on Wednesday about the right to the city in Asian region. I really thank you for the colleagues are participate from in this town hall session. You make a fantastic contributions, and then we sure go to continue to have this dialogue. In the end of this month, beginning the November, we go to organize from the global platform some webinars to discuss some special thematics we present, in the last session Wednesday, the thematics about the right to the city and the pandemic, the COVID-19, the right to the city and the climate change, the right to the city and the city's a common good. Now we go organize with our colleagues consultants webinars to discuss the first draft of the documents, where papers, thematic paper were elaborating for these thematic issues, very important for us also. And then we go to invite you, to join your contributions for these webinar sessions also. So thank you very much. And we continue with this dialogue, very important for the perspective, the right to the city in Asia region. Thank you very much for everyone for the participation.